This camera still is one of the most popular cameras in the world right now, the Fujifilm X100V. But far before this captured my attention, the attention of TikTok, Fujifilm was making little cameras like these. This is the Fujifilm FinePix E550. It is what the youngins are calling a Digicam. This was the first camera that I ever had of my own in my entire life, and I bought it for a trip that I took to India directly after graduating from high school. So obviously we're going to be dating how old I am in this video, but there's something to be said about going back and using the first tools that you ever had, and especially at the time, I obviously didn't think of this as a tool, thought of it as just something to help me kind of document this crazy trip that I was going to go on. But now in retrospect, having this camera and being able to use it, I'm able to look at it from an actual professional's point of view and see the things that I like and don't like about it, and we can talk about the images and whether or not you, in the year of our Lord 2023, should be considering buying this camera that is now, I think, about 18 or 19 years old. So this thing is a 6 megapixel camera with about a 1/2 inch sensor. So I have phones in my office that have larger sensors than this thing, but it does have a 32 millimeter to about 130 millimeter lens, I believe, and actually does start up pretty quickly. There's not a lot of delay, anything like that. You do have the ability to use like full manual if you wanted to on some of this stuff. And for the Fujifilm enthusiasts in the crowd, it has what aren't technically film simulations, but it has color modes. So it has a black and white, it has a standard mode, and it has a chrome. So kind of the first iteration of Fuji's like actual film simulations. And the chrome mode on here does look really good. There's something about the files out of this thing, and even just the JPEGs, that sure, they're not perfect, they lack dynamic range at times, but the skin tones and some of the contrast and stuff does look pretty good on this thing. So we've got some weird stuff in here, but we use an XD card, which is way too expensive because no one makes these anymore. So finding even a 256 megabyte card, I think I spent as much on this card as it was to buy this camera. But on the bright side, it takes AA batteries. So especially when I was on my trip in India, the availability to just go into basically any corner store, even in the middle of nowhere, and pick up some AA batteries made this quite a lot easier to use. I believe that I had like a 756 megabyte card, something like that. So in my 3 months in India, I had less than a gig, and I was definitely deleting photos a lot of the time. And so not the best for something like this, but it was still kind of nice to be able to, in the days of a lot of people using film, to be able to have a couple hundred photos on a little camera like this. But the other thing that I'm really bummed about on this camera is it just takes a really, really weird USB cable. Not really sure like what it actually is. It seems like it's some weird proprietary thing. I believe when I owned this camera originally, I had like a dock for it. So maybe it's just like in a box at my parents' somewhere or something. I have no idea where this camera is. So some of the nice things, it does start up quick, like it said. It does have this little pop-up flash. And one of the things that has stuck with me in my work all the way until now, I still do this at wedding receptions. I didn't exactly know what it was doing at the time, but obviously in retrospect, once I learned a little bit more about photography, this night mode paired with the flash, it basically just drags the shutter. So it flashes the camera and then gives you a longer exposure. So the nice thing is like you do this, then you kind of do one of these things, and you can get that whole like dragged shutter, crazy, blurry chaos look that I use a lot for a lot of my wedding reception stuff. So it's funny because I learned how to do that off of this camera, And it's, yeah, something I still do to this day. Color's great on this little thing. The flash, all that kind of stuff, it works pretty well. I mean, you're not going to get crazy image quality, but I will say that I have printed up pretty large prints out of this thing because just some of the stuff that I shot in India was interesting enough that I wanted to print it, and they've held up pretty well. It's only 6 megapixels, and I think there were definitely times where I was shooting it at like 3 megapixels. But all that being said, for what it is, and especially if you wanted to use it for social media use and stuff like that now, or little 4x6 prints, still is going to work pretty well. So enough talking. Let's look over some of the photos that I took while I was in India as a 19-year-old, and then we can come back, see some of the new stuff that I've taken just around the house with my kids and whatnot, and then I'll give you my final thoughts. So, I mean, this thing is not going to be impressive necessarily, unless you think of it as a camera that is, I think, 18 or 19 years old now, and this thing can legally vote. And if you can get over kind of some of the weird things like the XD card and the weird little USB cable here, it's a fun little camera. I think for a lot of people, it will give you enough of an experience like the X100 or something that, I don't know, I think it's worthwhile. I think that if I could find more of these, I might start bringing them to wedding receptions and just like handing them out to people in like the wedding party or stuff like that, because it is really fun to get little kind of like candid shots on this thing. And I think, yeah, maybe I'll start shooting some of it at wedding receptions as well. So let me know if you have any questions about this thing. Obviously kind of an odd review thing here, but obviously has a lot of sentimental value to me. And I think that there are a lot of just like overlooked little cameras out there that kind of were in the middle of that like pre-fully digital era and are, yeah, a lot more overlooked. So if you want to see more of my thoughts on the X100 series cameras, you can check that out up here. And then YouTube seems to think that you'd really like this video, so I will see you in one of those.